Kurt Warner, if not the most amazing Cinderella stories in NFL history. Well, coming from a grocery store bagger to a temporary European football star to an NFL MVP and the Super Bowl winning quarterback of the St. Louis Rams, and was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame back in 2017. But the funny part of his whole rise of fame, it happened in 1 year. Back in 1999, and it happened all out of sheer luck, as the original starting quarterback Trent Green went down with a torn ACL injury during a preseason game against the Chargers. And this famous line from the Rams head coach Dick Vermeil was said about the quarterback situation in St. Louis.
We will rally around Kurt Warner, and we'll play good football.
So in 1999, the Rams managed to build up their team to make the hype around them serious, and all the questions were on this undrafted free agent who is 28 years old and never played a snap of pro football. So Warner responds to all the questions with his best season in NFL at the time by throwing 41 touchdowns and 4,353 yards. Warner leads the Rams to a 13-3 record and a close Super Bowl 34 victory against the Titans, 23-16. Warner had a slight decline in 2000 due to injury. He also managed to come back in 2001 and do the exact same thing and going 14-2, winning the MVP for the second time and appearing in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. However, they lost the game in incredible fashion. I actually covered this game in a previous video along with the 2001 Rams team, so if you want to check out that video, then click the card on the top right of your screen. Anyway, after the loss of Super Bowl 36, the Rams fell apart. Warner took his biggest hit as injuries caught up with him, and he was released from the Rams after the 2003 season and had a short stunt with the Giants, and later the Cardinals ended up leading them to their first Super Bowl in 2008, where they lost a close one to the Steelers. Warner, after the 2009 season, age caught up to him. He was no longer able to play football anymore and retired in 2010. 7 years later, Warner was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where his name lives on forever and is known as one of the greatest undrafted free agents in NFL history. Now, Warner is not the only one to have his name, as there is another player to have the same upbringing, being the name Warren Moon. Moon was also undrafted in 1978 and decided to play in the CFL, where he was signed by the Edmonton Eskimos. Like Warner, Moon dominated the CFL and led the Eskimos to 5 straight Grey Cup titles from 1978 to 1982. This caught the attention of the NFL following the 1983 season. Moon wanted to play in the NFL, and many teams actually went into a bidding war to have Moon. And the Houston Oilers won and signed the 28-year-old Warren Moon. He started right away, as the quarterback before him retired that offseason, and Moon ended up adjusting to the NFL system quick and became a legend of the Oilers, playing for 9 seasons before heading to Minnesota and having a revival there before going to Seattle for 2 seasons and spent his last 2 years as a backup in Kansas City before retiring in 2000. So overall, overlooking both of their careers, they are very similar, which is why I thought it was a good matchup and decided to cover on. Warner and Moon are similar in the following ways. They both went undrafted. They both started playing at the age of 28 years old. They both became stars in foreign football leagues and both had revivals on their teams. Also, when Warren Moon left, Kurt Warner was on the rise. So they played in a different era, which is interesting. So in all, both quarterbacks mentioned here are very similar, like the video I covered with Michael Vick and Randall Cunningham. And in that video, that video did really well, and the video with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. So I want to keep this series running, and I went through some players, and I thought this matchup would be the best. So without further ado, let's go over Kurt Warner versus Warren Moon. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over the attributes I want to cover with these two quarterbacks. Now the attributes will be passing ability, achievements, the revival, and the impact. So if you have not already, leave a like on this video, as that would be much appreciated. And if you are new to the channel, then consider subscribing to the channel, as it would make my day, and we are growing quite a bit, and I like where we're going, so that's fantastic, and hopefully we can keep it going. Anyway, let's continue. Passing ability is the most important aspect of being a quarterback, as the whole idea of being an efficient quarterback is the ability to throw a football well enough to a receiver. So let's talk about Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner is considered to be a gunslinger type passer, which is where they like to fit the ball in tight places. This can cause a lot of interceptions, and if you look at his career touchdown to interceptions ratio, you can see as his career passing stats for Warner, he has thrown for 32,344 yards, 208 touchdowns, and 128 interceptions, and completed 65.5% of his passes. Now, that stat that catches people off guard is the low amount of passing yards. Now, this is the case because 2 big reasons. One being the fact that Kurt Warner was laced with injury throughout his whole career. I mean, after his 2001 season, he was not able to play a full 16 games until 7 years later in 2008 with the Cardinals. More on that later. And 2 being the fact that he did not really play for that long. Now, if you go on Pro Football Stats for Warner, he has been playing for 12 years, which is already a lot lower compared to the other star quarterbacks at that time. But what's even more alarming is how little he actually played in those 12 years. Let me explain. Out of those 12 seasons, Warner was able to fully play in only 3 of them. 5 of those 12 seasons were he was able to play 10 or more games. This is insane, along with a factoring of age when Warner played, which was 28. Now, put that into perspective. Most rookies are at the age of 22 to 23 years, and Warner started 5 or 6 years later than average, which is another factor on why his stats are so low. However, in those seasons he was fully healthy, he dominated, as in those seasons he was a top-end passer. I would say his benefits of Warner as a passer is he is gutsy. His ability to stay in the pocket during collapse and still throw dimes is impressive, along with his ability to sidearm throws are impressive as well. I would say his throwing style is related to, I say, Phillip Rivers mixed with Drew Brees. I would say his downsides are his slow release and cockback, and this has been a reason for why he has hit so much during his career. Overall, Kurt Warner's passing abilities are multiple trade-offs. His advantages are he is completely fearless in the pocket. His ability to look down the field is crazy, with crazy pass rush is noteworthy, and it makes up for his lack of speed, and he's able to buy some time without giving his offensive line too much to deal with. Along with his incredible ability to sidearm passes and maneuver receivers with his quick reads makes him a threat. However, his disadvantages is that he can be a turnover machine. He has a slower than average release, and his play style can allow defensive linemen to lay hits on him, which can cause injury. With that, when healthy, he is an elite along with a dangerous passer. Now, as for Warren Moon, things are a little bit different here. So before I discuss the differences in his actual throwing ability, let's talk about his stats, shall we? Moon in his career totaled 49,325 passing yards, 291 touchdowns, and 233 interceptions, and has completed 58.4% of his passes. Now, like Warner, there is one thing that sticks out about Moon's stats. Well, actually 2 things. One being the high amount of interceptions and the very low completion percentage. Now, if you look at his stats, you notice that Warren Moon has never had a season where he completed more than 65% of his passes. Now, I believe the big reason behind this was because, like Warner, Moon was a gunslinger. That does explain the high amount of interceptions as well, but let's talk more about his passing attributes. Now, Warren Moon had a pretty quick release and has a similar throwing style to that of Tom Brady. I would say his disadvantages are the following. Moon is able to get a quick release on the ball, which can save him for last-second throws. Also, when Moon drops back to pass, sometimes he pivots to his left before he shifts back to his right. Now, this is a very rare dropback style, as quarterbacks have not used this since the 1940s. It's considered a very outdated because the shift to the left was marked as unnecessary, and it takes away time. Now, although this is true to an extent, it can actually be beneficial, as when dropping back and shifting to the left side, you are able to see the other half of the field easier, which allows for more options. So, I see it as a double-edged sword, so take it as you will. Now, as for disadvantages, he is a turnover machine, and he can be very inaccurate at times. Now that we've talked about both, let's compare stats. Now, when looking at these stats side by side, Warren Moon beats out Warner in passing yards, passing touchdowns, interceptions, and games played, while Warner has a noticeably higher completion percentage. Now, when looking at these side by side, it looks like Warren Moon beats out Warner, right? Well, Moon did play for a lot longer than Warner did, so as Moon played for 17 seasons, while Warner only played for 12. Now, some people will make the argument like that Warren Moon was far more durable than Warner, which justifies the noticeably longer play. Although that is a fair argument, I'll just ignore it because I want to judge purely on their play when healthy. So with that, let's see the per game averages. So for Warren Moon, he has about 237 passing yards per game, along with 1.39 touchdowns and 1.12 interceptions per game, with a 58.4 completion percentage overall. As for Warner, he has averaged about 260 passing yards per game, along with 1.6 touchdowns and 0.96 interceptions. Now, looking at their averages, the whole thing changes here, as Kurt Warner beats out Warren Moon in every category, and this covers the spectrum better. But in game by game statistically, Warner is a better quarterback. But that's not everything here for this category. Now, who can throw the ball better? I would still say it's Kurt Warner here now, although this does draw a lot of question marks. But you have to look at it this way. Historically and statistically, Moon is not the most accurate passer. His low completion percentage says so, along with many interceptions he has as well. Moon, although really good, he often tries to unnecessarily fit way too many tight balls into dangerous coverage. Now, when it works, that's what makes him famous, and where the highlights come in. But most of the time, those passes don't work. Kurt Warner's awareness is fantastic. His maneuverability in the pocket is second to none, and takes a lot less unnecessary risk. And because of that, I will give the slight edge to Kurt Warner for passing ability. Now that we have covered passing ability, let's talk about each of their achievements. Now, Now let's talk about Kurt Warner first. Now I think Kurt Warner really got into the Hall of Fame mostly due to his achievements. I definitely see why. Let's list off the achievements. Kurt Warner has received 2 MVPs, 4 Pro Bowls, 3 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl victory, a Super Bowl MVP, 2 first-team All-Pros, and got inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2017. So let's say that's a lot on his resume. As for Warren Moon, he has acquired 9 Pro Bowls and was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2006. Now, I don't think we really need to talk about this too much, so I'll give the edge to Kurt Warner here for achievements. Sorry this was so short. Let's talk about the next topic, being the revival. Now, what makes these 2 quarterbacks special was their revival. They each had one. So first, let's address Warren Moon. Now, Warren Moon's revival period was extremely impressive. Here, as it lasted from 1994 to 1998, roughly, which is basically his time with the Vikings and his short time with the Seahawks. Some would say his best season came with the Vikings, as in 1995, Moon had his career high in completions with 377 completions and threw for 4,228 yards, and tied his career best in passing touchdowns with 33. Not only that, Warren Moon was able to get his first Hall of Fame receiver in his career with Chris Carter, and together they were a great combo, and his stats say so. In Moon's first 2 seasons with the Vikings, he was able to pass for over 4,000 yards, and in his 4th and final season with the Vikings, Moon was able to drop over 3,000 yards passing and 25 touchdowns. So as a player, he was Pro Bowl caliber. What's even more impressive is that he was able to drop 4,000 passing yards and 30 plus touchdown seasons at the ages of 38 to 41. Although that is not really impressive nowadays because Tom Brady's doing it with ease. But you have to consider the team Moon was on and what time he was playing as well. There are no rules to protect a quarterback like they have today, and playing at that high of a level is unheard of and is a testament to his durability. Moon was one of the first Super Bowl era quarterbacks to do it, so you can't shy away from that. I could talk about more, but I think you get the point. So let's continue with Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner's revival is not nearly as long as Warren Moon's, but he was able to do something Warren Moon could not do with his time with the Vikings or the Seahawks or his whole career, that being a Super Bowl appearance. In Warner's 4th season with the Cardinals, he was able to bring the Cardinals to their first ever Super Bowl in 2008. However, they do end up losing to the Steelers in a close game. But during that season, Warner was able to put up fantastic numbers as he threw for 4,583 passing yards, which is better than that magical 1999 season, and threw for 30 touchdowns. Now, in Warner's 5 seasons in Arizona, he amassed for over 14,000 passing yards and 100 touchdowns and completed 65.1% of his passes. Now that we've discussed both, let's compare the statistics for each player, starting with Warren Moon. Moon, in his time with the Vikings and the Seahawks, he has thrown for 15,412 yards, 94 touchdowns, and 66 interceptions, and has completed 59.5% of his passes. As for Kurt Warner, he has amassed 15,843 passing yards and 100 touchdowns and 59 interceptions, and has completed 65.1% of his passes. Now, looking at these stats side by side, it tells a different story here, as Warner beats Moon in every category, and Moon played in 64 games while Warner played in only 57. So there would be no point in doing game averages. Now, some Warren Moon fans would probably think that Kurt Warner played on a better team than any of the teams Moon has played on. And to those people, this is somewhat true. For Moon's time with the Seattle Seahawks, however, this is not really the case with his time for the Vikings. Now, of course, let me explain. Kurt Warner's Cardinals were not that great during its duration. Their run game was at the bottom of the league, and there was only Larry Fitzgerald and Quan Bolin who made the Pro Bowl that year on offense for the Cardinals. Not to mention, Warner's record with the Cardinals is below 500, as he won 27 games and lost 30 of them. I mean, yeah, Warner had some receivers to throw to, but he had no running game to help support, or no defense, or lineman, or a solid tight end. So a lot of the team's success came off of Warner's excellent play. As for Warren Moon, he had a Hall of Fame caliber receiver in Chris Carter, a superstar tight end in Jake Reed, a star running back in Robert Smith, and on top of all that, a Hall of Fame guard in Randall McDaniel. So Warren Moon had more to work with than Warner did. As for his time with the Seahawks, Moon really did not have too much work with, besides 2 Hall of Fame offensive linemen, a superstar fullback in Max Strong, a star wide receiver in Joey Galloway, and a solid running back in Chris Warren. So you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, he did have some talent on the Seahawks. And when looking at these stats and how Kurt Warner beats Warren Moon in every passing category, along with Warner making the Super Bowl with considerably less talent than Warren Moon made it to only 1 playoff game in his appearance in 5 years with his time with his Vikings. Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks just could not stack up. Now, I know some people will say Warren Moon was injured, so he was limited on playing time. And yes, that is true, but you have to look on the other side of the spectrum. Kurt Warner only had one full season with the Cardinals and played in less games overall with the Cardinals. On top of that, Warner was set back a lot with his time with the Cardinals, as he was not even meant to be played as a starter, rather a backup to the rookie Matt Leinart and to help him out, but he still had a little left in him and played anyway. So I don't really see any point that can back up Moon here. Now, don't get me wrong, Warren Moon was fantastic during his revival period, but Kurt Warner was able to work with less talent and a terrible franchise and brought them to a Super Bowl and have better stats, so I give the edge for Kurt Warner for revivals. Now let's hit on the final topic up for this matchup, and that's going to be the impact. How do these players impact their team? Let's start with Kurt Warner's impact, and don't worry, I'll make this quick. With his time with St. Louis, Warner was able to make his team go to 2 Super Bowls, 1 Super Bowl win, and made the Rams from 1999 to 2001 the most dominant football team in the NFL and possibly of all time. Even after his tenure with the Rams, he was able to turn a crappy Cardinals team into a solid postseason contender in the late 2000s. Now, although that is good, there's one notable thing to point out here, and that was how much did Warner impact the greatest show on turf. If you don't know what I mean, here we go. The St. Louis Rams in 1999 had a stacked team. They just got Marshall Faulk from the previous offseason, and they just drafted star receiver Torrey Holt in the 99 draft, along with future Hall of Fame receiver Isaac Bruce, makes this offense unstoppable on paper. Now, the original quarterback for the Rams in 1999 was Trent Green, who previously played 2 years in Washington and was solid. So if Trent Green never got injured, how would the Rams do? Well, I think he would do pretty good. I don't see the Rams led by Green to make a Super Bowl at all, due to the fact that he was not a dependable thrower. But Warner was considered the centerpiece for the greatest show on turf, as he was the quarterback of the team and played very well. We know that because he earned an MVP award in not 1 time, but 2. So Warner had a huge impact for the Rams, especially because no one expected it. As for Warren Moon, it is slightly different. When he went to the Oilers, he was literally shoved in the mess, which was the mid-80s Oilers, and literally no talent was around him for 10 years and was still able to perform at a high level. During his time with the Oilers, he was able to bring them to the playoffs 9 times. So he changed a terrible team to a playoff contender just by himself. So bringing a bad team to a playoff contender is completely insane. Although he was not able to repeat the same success with the Vikings and the Seahawks, he impacted his team immensely despite not attending or winning a Super Bowl. Now, who wins here? Well, I'll have to give this one a tie. Now, I know some people think Kurt Warner might get the edge here, but I saw Warner to be a piece in the puzzle when it came to the 1999 team. Also, his impact on the Rams did not last long at all, while Warren Moon was able to keep the same high level for 10 years with a crappy Oilers team. And since Moon could not really win with the Oilers or any team, I'll have to give it a draw. Now we have gone over everything, but let's get a quick recap of everything, starting with passing ability. Now, it was considered very close here, but I give this very slight edge to Kurt Warner because his game by game stats were not only better, his throwing style was a little bit less risky, so the edge went to Warner. As for achievements, this one was very one-sided, as the big edge went to Kurt Warner, just because he won so many awards, so that was pretty easy. As for revival, it was a little more complicated at first, because Warren Moon was known for having multiple good seasons with the Vikings and having some solid ones in Seattle. However, after looking at some stats, Warner beats out Moon despite having multiple seasons riddled with injury and below average play in the same amount of time, that being 5 years, and not to mention, Warner made it to a Super Bowl during his time with the Cardinals, while Moon did not even win a playoff game, so I give the edge to Warner. As for the impact, I decided to give it out a draw, as Moon was able to keep a very bad Oilers team playoff teams for a decade, while Warner was able to make the Rams super good, but for only a short time, so I gave it a draw. Now that we've been over everything, I just want to point out that although Kurt Warner did get most of the edges in this video, it is a lot closer than you think. I don't want you to think that Warren Moon is out in this comparison, so those Warren Moon fans can keep this in mind. Moon was far more durable than Warner ever was. Ultimately, he was able to keep playing at a high level a lot longer than Warner was, and so that's impressive. So this is a very hard decision and go either way. But what do you guys think is the better quarterback? I left a poll on the card on you guys so you guys can vote for the winner. And since you already made your decision, it is time to make mine. The winner for this matchup, in my opinion, is going to be Kurt Warner. Now, this will come as a massive shock to a lot of people, so let me explain. Kurt Warner was not only a winner, he was statistically better than Moon was game by game. He was able to work with better despite having heavy injury he had throughout his whole career, and yet still able to win 2 MVPs. Well, Moon has none. Yes, I know Warren Moon was on worse teams than Warner did, but the Oilers of the 80s and early 90s were not as bad as you think. The Oilers during the Moon era was always a top 10 offense and produced multiple Pro Bowlers, and was home to the best offensive lineman to ever play football in Bruce Matthews. The only problem was that their defense was off. However, they were always contenders. Not to mention, Warner also went to a very bad Cardinals team and was able to bring them to a Super Bowl, while Moon had better teams than the 2008 Cardinals and still could not win a Super Bowl, which says a lot. Now, if we are talking about pure career numbers, then Moon obviously wins, but Warner has better averages. He impacted his teams he played on way more than Moon was ever able to do, and Moon was a massive turnover machine. However, if someone told me that Warner and Moon was better with some solid evidence, then I can believe that, as I believe Warner was only slightly better, and that can really go either way depending on how you look at it. But to me, I would rather have Warner on my team, and if they both stayed healthy throughout their careers, Warner would be better, no questions asked. So the winner here is Kurt Warner. Alright everybody, that'll be all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was a very long one, and it took a long time to edit, so if you liked the video, then consider leaving a like on the video, and possibly subscribing to the channel, as that'll be much appreciated, and I will not hold you up much longer. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.